Good afternoon. Hello, everybody. Hello. How are you doing? Kumnandi eThekwini. I'm a visitor for the day. How pelanga bungoga. So I'm back from exile from Johannesburg, and I decided that this was far too important a conversation to miss. So the first thing that I thought I was going to see was a red carpet, and then it turned out that because the VIPs are actually not on stage, but they're there, the red carpets turned out to be the red seats where you're all sitting. So it's very creative what they've done here in the city of eThekwini. My name is Khaya Sithole, and I have the responsibility of pretending that I know things by asking questions that give the impression that I know what I'm talking about. But no, the reality here is that the people that are going to join me on stage are the ones that are the true experts of the type of issues and the type of conversations that we need to be having. So even though I may keep saying something, it's actually their inputs that we're here to harness and canvas. It is an audience in the room that is made up of individuals who obviously have a much stronger sense of commitment to fixing the issues that the country faces. So we thought this was a conversation that would resonate with you. Now, throughout the course of this conversation, I would like to put a challenge to you. And the challenge is to ask yourselves the question of what is it that we can do differently? What is it that we can do better in order to be able to tackle some of the underlying issues that we're going to be talking about here? The reality is that in South Africa, we do have a set of challenges and a set of issues that we need to collectively try to address. Now, in addressing those, it's always very important to be able to understand where we are. It's even more important to try and figure out where we're going, because in the absence of that prism of analysis, we kind of just talk amongst each other, we talk to ourselves, and then we move on to the next conference. So this is not that type of echo chamber where we simply talk and not actually make resolutions. So the challenge that each one of you will have is that at the end of this conversation, you need to be able to say that actually this is what I want to do, or this is how I'm going to do things differently, in order to be able to ensure that by the time we convene a year down the line, we are much closer to resolving some of the key challenges that we have here. Now, when I call upon my panel, you need to be very aware that a lot of them, when they were younger, they wanted to be in the world of entertainment. They wanted to be actresses and they wanted to be sports people. It kind of didn't work out like that. They all turned out to be very good academics, so they're very technical. So that means that whenever they come to the ICC, the only chance that they have of having a wonderful round of applause and getting a red carpet is at this particular event. So I'll ask you to treat them as celebrities for at least a moment until they get onto the stage. My first panelist is going to be someone who is representing the Chief Executive Officer of the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, Ms. Patricia Stock. He is responsible for being the person that keeps reminding accountants in Johannesburg that actually there's a much bigger world out there, there's a much bigger canvas, and there's many more conversations to be had. Msizi Gwala. Wayungphazamisa. Right? Our next speaker is someone who is famous for actually being in the habit and in the business of putting insights together. Now, what that means is that we have conversations of this nature, the Auditor General publishes reports, and at some point in time, someone needs to put it together and make sure that it makes sense to all of us. And this comes in the form of a publication. The publication is called the Municipal Edge, which gives a lot of very detailed insights into what happens in the world of governance, what happens in the world of local government. The editor of Municipal Edge and our speaker for today is Dr. Lungelwa Kaywood. She's a celebrity for a day. Right. Our next speaker is someone that you and I may think is, someone who looks a bit younger than what his experience implies, because when you read his CV, you're like, yo, how did this man pack all of this into such a short time frame? But he's someone who has been actively involved in trying to make differences in the public sector and trying to keep making those incremental changes that get us into a better position than we were. He is someone who actually went to university, the same university I went to. He didn't go to university with me because I'm really young, and he isn't. But he did go to the University of KwaZulu-Natal just up the road here, and he studied as an accountant, and he is indeed a chartered accountant. He spent the past 24 years working in the public sector, trying to make a difference there, and he is Vinay Rambali from the Auditor General of South Africa. A celebrity for a day. Our next speaker is someone who has seen it all. When I say he's seen it all, I don't mean that he's been on Instagram and gone through all your profiles, but he's actually worked in the trenches of what the public service is about. He has learned, he has grown in that particular public service, and he has then gathered the type of insights. And when we said, we need to have a conversation about what happens there, everyone was like, that man is going to tell you exactly what happens in that space. He's worked in some of the more interesting entities that some of us know about. I think the South African Post Office is an interesting one, given the type of challenges that it has. And if you want to just walk across when you're done, you know, Ushaga Marine World, that place, he used to work there. So this is a person who's seen it all. And our next speaker is Mr. Jabulani Dlamuka. Our last speaker, who is going to run onto the stage because he's going to do the whole I'm a celebrity, get me into the stage type of thing, is the Vice President of CIGFARO, who is actually somebody who's been involved in trying to understand the underlying dimensions of the type of problems that some of us tend to report about. So a certified fraud examiner is the type of person that you call upon to say, look, we think something is not working well, and we think something hasn't worked out yet, come and tell us what it's all about. And he is the one person who said that he was going to make sure he was going to dress better than me today, and that is Mr. Amos Twala. Did he get it right? Did he get it right? Yeah, he kind of dressed better than me. So, my mic is no longer mobile. Technical, the mobile mic that I was promised is no longer mobile or visible. So I will stand on stage until I get another mic. Oh, it's coming. See? Leadership. Thank you very much. Guys, you know what? Do you see how wonderful this audience looks? I mean, you obviously are not Rebecca Malope. You're not going to perform on stage, but this is your best opportunity to have access to such a wide audience at the ICC. So thank you very much for coming through. So I'm going to start with you, Vice President. I mean, we do know that this is a country where there's a lot of issues that we need to be able to canvass and a lot of issues that we need to be able to address. When we look at the state of the public sector and we look at where we are now, some people would say the prism of analysis is the reports that we get either from the Auditor General or from parliamentary submissions. But at the heart of it, there is still this series of glaring challenges that we need to be able to tackle. From the perspective of CIGFARO, what are the 2 or 3 key challenges that we still face in the public sector?
No, thank you very much. I think the key challenges that we are facing in the public sector is the kind of audit outcomes that we are getting. And some of those audit outcomes, they are repetitive in nature, meaning that the role that is supposed to be played by auditors in assisting management, because if you look in terms of the definition of internal audit is supposed to add value and assist management to achieve its objectives. In the local government environment, we talk about service delivery. Internal audit is supposed to make sure that those services that are supposed to be delivered, management is able to do that. And as internal auditors, we need to come in and make sure that we provide that insight that is needed by management in order for it to be able to achieve that. And then we also need to look at other components within the internal audit. We need to look at the organizational status of internal audit to check whether internal audit, where it's stationed, is it able to influence the decisions of management. And then we also need to look at your issues of people's management, to look at the skills that we have in your internal audit. Are those skills able to assist management to achieve its objectives? And then again, look at issues like your independence. Is internal audit independent so that it's not influenced by management as they do their work? And then again, the management support that you get from management, is management able to provide the support that is needed for internal audit to be able to, to assist? And then again, another thing that we need to look at is the resource management. Is internal audit able to have the necessary resource so that they can be able to achieve, to assist management to achieve its objective? Are they even in control of the budget in the municipality, or is the budget still sitting maybe in another office, maybe of the CFO and the like? So those are the issues that we need to look at. And then again, Another challenge that we have seen is the type of skills that we have, especially on the side of the audit committee. If audit committee is supposed to provide an oversight in that organization, what kind of skills are we employing in that audit committee so that they are able to add value? We have seen that in most municipalities, the problem that is there, the audit committee that is employed, most of them, they have the same skills, meaning that they are unable to provide the oversight that is supposed to be provided. So we encourage that even in an internal audit function, we cannot have a situation whereby you have only internal auditors or people who are qualified as internal auditors employed in that internal audit function. You need to make sure that you mix those skills that are there so that they can be able, if they are auditing a certain component, you will have someone who has the necessary skills to be able to add value. And then another thing that we have noticed is that there's lots of fatigue when it comes to auditing, meaning that there's no proper combined assurance. I mean, in those municipalities, other assurance providers, they'll go and ask for the same information, and then that means internal audit will be asking for the same information, risk will be asking for the same information. So at the end of the day, there's no combined assurance in that municipality. And then another one that we have seen as a problem is the implementation of internal audit recommendations and other assurance providers, like your risk mitigation, that are not implemented by management. So now, what we need to do is to make sure that as part of the performance agreements that we enter with management, there's supposed to be your KPIs that talks to this, your risk mitigations, as well as your implementation of internal audit recommendations. We need to make sure that those, they find expression, and as we do the assessment of, on management, we need to look at those things. And then another factor that we need to bring in is a proactive audit. Proactive audit, it means that before APR is submitted to AG, it needs to go to internal audit so that they can look at it, look at the POEs that are attached on that APR, if they really talk to, the SDP. So those are the things that we need to look at. And then also we need to implement what we call the reviewal of interim financial statements to make sure that before those financial statements are submitted to AG, as internal audit, we need to look at them and make sure that there will be no unnecessary misstatements that will be found by AG. So those are some of the things that we need to look at as internal audit.
No, thank you. So internal audit plays a critical role in the entire financial reporting ecosystem. And I gather from your sentiments that what distinguishes it is obviously the fact that it is embedded within the organization, very different to the type of consultants that you see, very different to the external auditors that come in at the end. So it is supposed to be embedded within this ecosystem. So my question to you is that from your observations, is this something that is adequately understood across the ecosystem? Do people understand the importance of it? Because in my childhood, audits, just like insurance policies, are great purchases, the things that you only get forced to embrace because somebody says it must be done. And that type of attitude probably doesn't help in embracing it. What have been your observations in that regard?
Yeah, in order for internal audit to be embraced by management, you need to get the buy-in from management. What we have seen with most of auditors, they will provide assurance even where they're supposed to be providing advisory services. In instances whereby you'll find that maybe every year AG comes and produces the same report with the same findings. As internal audit, you need to move away from your comfort zone and try and engage management to say, this is the kind of advisory services that I can be able to provide to you so that you are able to move from the audit outcome that we are receiving from the AG. However, internal audit, as they do that, they need to come up with safeguards in order for their independence not to be compromised. That's another factor that they need to put in to make sure that they don't re-audit themselves. They need to make sure that they put in safeguards in that respect, yes.
Okay, we're going to come back to that one because there's a couple of follow-up questions that I have. Mr. Dlamuga, you've seen it all. You've been through all these different institutions. You've seen the evolution of some of these institutions. In your own words, what are the two key challenges that we still face in the public sector?
Yes. Thanks. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thanks very much, Khaya. I think the key one is actually the state of the infrastructure, Khaya, in the public sector. It's of the state that is so unreliable. We're failing to deliver as a public sector to our mandate, which is to provide service to the community. But it's linked and it drives to a number of important aspects. If the infrastructure cannot deliver service, people are not going to pay for service. The collection rate is going to dwindle. It's going to come down drastically. The balance sheet is going to be weak. We're not going to be able to get to the capital market to raise funding. And the cycle just continues. If we cannot then get money to fund infrastructure in the public sector, we're always going to be in a very bad situation. Then what we need to do is actually, I think, the first step is for the public sector and the private sector to collaborate. You see, collaboration is an only tool. We cannot do anything without this collaboration. Every of these particular parties has got a critical role to deliver the infrastructure in the public. And we need to work together, whether it's through the Triple P's model or whatever model, but we need to come and work together. The second aspect is actually to look to the local municipality. You see, these guys have got the weakest of the balance sheet. They can't go to the capital market. So the funding model that we're currently using, especially National Treasury, is misaligned, is incorrect. If they cannot go to the capital market, they can't rely from rates in general to provide funding, then where they should be going. So we need a solution to say, how do we de-risk then these particular projects belonging to those particular municipalities? I think we need to go back to the issues of provision of the guarantees by the National Treasury. So that these particular institutions can also go to the financial institution and raise funding so that they can fund the capital project. Another aspect is to look to the performance incentive. Grants should be performance-based. If we drive the grant reform, we should be linking it to performance to the municipality so that we actually compensate for the good performance in the municipality. We always encourage municipality to do almost best to make sure that service delivery is actually taking place. So if we can bring these together, I think we can make a difference. And if we can provide service to the community, people will pay. The challenge is that you find that people will leave Boxer, for example, Khaya and audience, and go to buy to Woolworth. Even if the price is too high, there's a premium there. But the risk is that you get the value for money. And that's what we're failing to provide. And our customers there are reluctant to pay because we can't provide the value to them. And then there is just a deteriorating state in our collection rate, and we are suffering so that we then cannot fund infrastructure. I think the whole model of funding then the basic infrastructure need to be reviewed and be actually adjusted to be aligned to the current regime where we are, where we've got the highest rate of unemployment. People are unemployed. Poverty is still very high. We've got higher rural community living in actually dangers of the society who needs investment in the infrastructure, but they can't have. You can't bring a bank to the area like Ward 1 in eThekwini, because it's actually rural, it's a rural village. If you go there and evaluate project on a commercial basis, you're never going to get return because the amount of investment you need, how do we then invest on the social infrastructure? Those rural infrastructure, because they are the key to fight this urbanization which is killing our urban area. So I will just stop there. Thanks a lot.
I imagine if National Treasury was in the room, their first pushback would be to say that the idea of allowing all these sub-national structures, whether it's local municipalities or even provincials, to go and prospect in the capital markets on the back of state guarantees means that we won't actually know what our true exposure is.
It's the biggest exposure, but if you look to the model the SOEs are doing, SOEs goes to raise funding based on the backup of the guarantee from the National Treasury. Without those guarantees, they can't go. We need to understand that the national fiscal is very constrained. We can't fund these. Then where is the other source of funding? What is the role of DFIs, or development funding institutions? How do we access those funding? You see, if they link these guarantees to performance and actually build performance to the municipality, it can go a wrong way. We can't let it go far long because the state is becoming worse and worse. And some of these institutions are collapsing on a daily basis because our infrastructure is basically close to being non-existent.
All right, thank you. Dr. Kaywood, I mean, in the type of data you collect on an ongoing basis in order to inform your editorial process, in order to inform your research processes, you've probably picked up what the common themes are, and you've probably picked up what the common blind spots are. What, in your view, are the two key challenges that we still face in the public sector?
It is always tempting to respond to the previous speaker because you get triggered. So, the challenges in local government are well documented, Mr. Sithole. Sorry, Khaya. They are well documented in research, they are well documented with media, they are well documented by your oversight bodies like your Auditor General, your National Treasury will give you the state of finance, your COCTA will give you their reports, your demarcation board will also even report on the capabilities or capacity in local government. So I think for me, perhaps we need to move away from discussing the challenges. They're there, we all know them. I'm sure if you were to ask a couple of people in the audience, they will give you their views of what the challenges are. Perhaps we really need to look at the root causes of these problems. And in this instance, then I would like to bring in the issue of the lack of accountability, which then leads to the culture of impunity. We can talk about poor audit outcomes, and we all know in this room what is the causes of the poor outcomes, but that is the outcome of something that has been going wrong in a municipality for a while. Having worked in local government and some of the spheres of local government, one picks up that the accountability, the lack thereof, is a major issue. If I constantly get away with doing the wrong, then I will continue doing it. And linked to that, Khaya, is the issue of politicized, highly politicized environment in the public sector, not just local government. We tend to focus on local government as if these issues are only pertinent in local government. The issue of politicization of the public sector. We cannot not talk about cadre deployment. I was cautioned not to talk about it, but because I'm a free agent, I am not associated to any organization. I can freely talk about it, and it's one of the advantages of being a researcher. Cadre deployment. One can, understand cadre deployment to an extent, but then when you start to benefit the political party that you are associated with using the public funds, then cadre deployment becomes a problem. But in its entirety, cadre deployment shouldn't be a problem. It happens, Chair. I have worked with different organs of state. I see it happens. What we rather should be concerned about is what I call quid pro quo. In local government, in the public sector, where Lungelwa Kaywood will be placed in a position because of what she can do for me as an individual. So I place her there so that I can benefit at a personal level. And that, I say, is a true or classic definition of corruption, which then brings me to perhaps what I would then highlight as a challenge. But I wanted to start with the root causes first. But corruption is a major problem in this country, not just in local government. The entire public sector lost 1.5 trillion between 2014 and 2019. I can go on and give the statistics. You can get them at the Corruption Watch. You can get them at the Ethics Institute. The Corruption Watch reports that on average per day, they receive 11 complaints of corruption. On average per day, 11%. And so much money we are losing on corruption, and we don't want to talk about it. That's the biggest elephant in the room. That's the major challenge that is threatening the sustainability of the entire public sector. We can argue and say, National Treasury, we need money. Yes, the fiscus is not enough. It has been proven, in fact, that some of the assumptions that were made when the white paper on local government was drafted, perhaps are flawed. We need to relook at them now. There were assumptions that local government would be able to generate a certain level of revenue, but we now can see that that is not the case. But then if I was Treasury and I was sitting in the room, they always make this argument to say, what are then you doing with the little that you are getting? So if we are going to be losing 1.5 trillion to corruption, is it an issue of us not really having money, or are we then perhaps prioritizing self-enrichment at the cost of the communities that we should be servicing? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. And there's a lot of important reflection points that we're going to come back to, but I do think that perhaps the question of how we have persisted with the model that keeps showing us flaws is one thing that we need to revisit, because we don't seem to be learning from what we've seen. Now, I mean, the Auditor General is the one institution that is as courageous as you are, because they tell us the way the story is without having to sugarcoat anything. And of course, the Constitution says that they must do. Mr. Vinay, from the insights of the Auditor General, I mean, I imagine that when you publish those reports, you could say there's 10,000 issues, but what are the one or two that, from the perspective of the AG, if we started getting them right, it could activate the correction of everything else in the ecosystem?
It doesn't look like it's working, but good afternoon, colleagues, and good afternoon, Khaya. Thanks for that question. From the Auditor General's perspective, and I think it's well documented, the audit outcomes hasn't improved. We've seen regressions, we've seen stagnations. Generally, audit outcomes are not improving. And when we unpack and sort of dive deeper into what are those key things, and you asked for one or two things, and I'll try and point it out. But linking to the previous speaker around the accountability, and as the Auditor General, we've developed our accountability ecosystem, which identifies the role players. And it starts with the officials that are on the ground processing invoices on a day-to-day basis, making sure that the assets are managed well, making sure that when you are billing clients for the services that you deliver, you are billing accurately, you're following up and you're collecting it. So understanding the roles and responsibilities as individuals that start the whole system. We as auditors come later, so the officials on the ground need to understand their role in terms of the accountability ecosystem, their responsibility. Then the senior management, your municipal managers, CFOs need to understand their responsibility in terms of oversight, review processes. Is the review process done effectively, or is it done as a desktop exercise? Is a budget being prepared for compliance purposes, just to tick a box, or is it a genuine budget that prevents a municipality from going into an unfunded situation, becoming financially distressed? Then you go on to the accounting officer, and the accounting officer supported by internal audit committee, understanding their roles from an oversight accountability perspective. From your in-year monitoring, are those reviews taking place? The colleague on internal audit spoke about using and getting the value from internal audit. Is internal audit involved in your significant risk areas? Are they doing the proactive reviews of your APR and your financial statements? Are they there when you're doing your big procurement? Are they overseeing that process? Just to make sure, not being involved in the process, but overseeing it, just to make sure that compliance is actually adhered to. And then you move to your audit committees. Are you getting the value from your audit committees? Or are they just coming and meeting for the sake of meeting, to have your 4 meetings a year? Or are they actually interrogating those reports and asking the questions as to why things are going wrong through the in-year monitoring process? And then you've got your municipal councils and the impacts, also understanding their role. And the Deputy Minister did speak about that, is that each of those role players need to know their responsibility, need to know what they need to do to drive this whole process. And that will drive credible financial reporting, that will drive credible performance reporting, and ultimately drive compliance with legislation. And looking at it from a broader perspective. So those would be the key things. People need to understand their roles, responsibilities. You cannot hold somebody accountable and implement consequence management if you haven't outlined the roles and responsibilities. You cannot implement consequence management if you haven't trained somebody. So training is important. I mean, you cannot say that somebody's got 20 years of experience and they should know how things are done. Things change. New standards are introduced. How did you prepare for a new accounting standard? Have you done a workshop with the subject matter expert around that to understand what's the implications of that accounting standard in terms of your financial statements? SEM regulations change all the time. There's new practice notes that's issued by National Treasury. Have you sort of institutionalized that practice note so that the people that are working on the ground and making sure that when they procure, they're aware of the latest regulations, the latest practice notes? Have you invited your provincial treasuries, your national treasury, to come and workshop that so that you clarify any gray areas? I mean, lots of those things sometimes becomes an issue of interpretation. And just making sure that you aligned to that and get that right from a upskilling point of view, from a skills capacity point of view. The other thing is around audit action plans. is audit action plans, and National Treasury is busy rolling out the web-enabled audit action plan. But is that the solution? But you need people that actually implements those audit action plans. Are those audit action plans done for compliance purposes as a tick box, or is it there to actually make sure that if I implement these recommendations, I wouldn't have that recurring issue? Have you subjected your audit action plans to an internal audit review and a monitoring process from internal audit to make sure that internal audit walks the journey with you, and as you implement, they can tick certain boxes and report to the audit committee? Have you engaged the Auditor General to see if the audit action plan is actually fit for purpose? It's not a consulting service. It is something that we can look at and say, what you're planning to do, will it prevent a recurrence, or will it create another problem for you? Then the last thing that I just wanted to touch on is around collaboration and coordination. There's many role players involved in the municipal financial space. And you can only achieve the objective of this conference, which is accelerating public finance excellence through collaboration and coordination. You don't want a situation where COCTA comes in and does something, and then next week National Treasury comes in, or your provincial treasury comes in and does something. It's the same thing, it's a duplication. Let's look at collaboration and coordination around these initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vinay. Msizi, I mean, you obviously are part of an institution that has access to the widest pool of finance talent that you can get, which is the Institute of Chartered Accountants. You also have a dedicated unit within CIGFARO that tries to focus on some of the public sector issues and some of the public sector solutions that we try to canvass. We've recently hosted a public sector summit where some of these issues were once again mentioned. From the perspective of CIGFARO, what remains the one or two biggest challenges that we have to be able to tackle in order to address this crisis?
Thank you, Khaya, and good afternoon, everybody. So I think maybe just to lash on to our good doctor's point there, a lot of these are documented, so I will try to focus on some of the more pertinent issues. One of the issues maybe that I can start with, and then we can reverse back into understanding the issues and the underlying issues, is the use of consultants. It's a contentious issue, Khaya, that is deliberated on, discussed, debated, and I'm sure a lot of the audience, members of the audience, have some kind of interaction with consultants. As CIGFARO, we have done our own research to try and understand, because this is something that has been consistently reported on by the Auditor General over the years as being an issue. So I think what we need to start going into, and this is something that our research has shown us, is really what is causing this use of consultants. Where is it coming from? And if we are going to solve the issue, let's call it solving the issue of consultants, then we need to really go into the root causes of the use of consultants. And that's where I think you start to get into the real challenges that the public sector faces broadly. If we talk in terms of skills, like you say, we pride ourselves in terms of what we've been able to do with the accounting profession in South Africa. It is well respected. And of course, there's a lot of things that we can discuss in terms of the specifics, nuances, etc. But what we've found is that a lot of the times, talent or people that want to, call it give back, maybe not giving back actually, but work in the public sector that come from our profession, either struggle and have challenges or face challenges. Sometimes they come back to us with these challenges to report and ask for advice in terms of how or what to do. And what you see, or what we have then seen, is that as a result, people who wish to go and work into the public sector, either one, find it challenging to do so. When they do, they find it challenging to stay within the sector and be able to, call it, make things work for themselves. Or maybe one can call it too hot, maybe someone can call it they don't have the competencies that, and maybe I use competencies loosely because some of the issues may require skills and competencies, but some actually get serious in some provinces, as you know, especially if you are looking under the public purse. And so it's this then myriad of issues that we are trying to unpack and understand really what is causing local government, state-owned entities to use consultants. Why are they not being insourced? And I don't mean to have a political conversation or philosophical view around insourcing versus outsourcing, but if we accept that, or if I, as an accounting officer, accept that I need these skills within the organization in order for me to, I don't know, report or whatever advice or role that person is playing, why do I opt to keep on contracting a firm rather than ensuring that if there is, because if you look at the AG's report, there's specific reasons or there's different reasons why they get these skills outside. Sometimes it's capacity, sometimes there's a vacancy. A lot of the time there's actually someone there who's supposed to be doing the work. And you then wonder why the decision is not made to just rather hire this person on a full-time basis. And we can get into deeper conversations around would all the 257 odd municipalities be able to then get the skills? How would that work? But I think what we have seen or what we see, or one of the main things that we are seeing is that there's a clear need for the skill and capacity or the skill that accounting professionals have. But it's not always insourced, if we can call it that. There's discussions or view that it should be outsourced every now and then. And of course, we've had good success stories. And I think we work with CIGFARO because of this, because we can see that working together, trying to advocate for the same thing kind of works, and it broadens our voice. But I think to a very large extent, we still have challenges around getting the right talent at the right time to go and work in the public sector. I think that's probably the main one, Kai.
Okay. No, thank you very much. So I think the essence of what we've heard is that there are definitely some pervasive challenges and challenges that you know are common across different municipal structures. And in talking about this, it sounds like all our speakers have got such deep insights about these issues because precisely they've been so well documented over time. So everybody kind of knows what the problem statement is. So now I want to canvass the idea of how to actually solve some of these problems. So Mzizi, you speak about the consultancy dependency, which we see being obviously reflected in the Auditor General's reports. And obviously that consultancy dependency, I link it to what Lungelwa said, in that for as long as people like you and I are anxious about going to work in the public sector because of the fears around what the politics of the day might be, what the deployment dimensions of the day might be, it becomes inevitable that you're going to have these particular gaps within the system that then trigger this reliance on consultants as a last measure or as a last resort measure at the very end of the period. So it feels like we're in this particular trap where until we solve that problem that Lungelwa mentioned, we are going to be stuck with the problem that you reflected on, and we're going to be stuck with what the Auditor General sort of say. So it's like this perpetual loop. Lungelwa, I mean, you raised a very important point about the fact that we have to tackle the elephant head on, in that, yes, we do know there's been too much politicization, there's been too much wrong deployment, and then there's the corruption that is crept in. What do we then need to start doing differently in order to decisively deal with those issues, particularly when we have to assume that the system of 257 subnational structures is going to remain as it is for a long time?
Look, there's so much that we can do. I mean, to expand more on what I wanted to say, I wanted to be harsh and say perhaps we have lost collective morality as a country, right? Or collective ethics. And I can say that because the law requires that from us. You're looking at Section 195 of the Constitution. It talks to us about the basic values and principles that should be governing the public sector. Not just local government, the entire public sector. So we have forgotten perhaps that we need a reminder of what those basic principles are. You know, The solutions are not something that will perhaps come from researchers only or one specific institution. The solutions in the public sector in general. And you can notice that I keep on talking about the public sector because I do not want this focus always on local government because all of us, the entire public sector system has an issue. So the solutions really cannot come from one institution, but there are certain individuals or certain organizations that, or certain governance structures. Perhaps if I focus on a municipality, there are certain people that should be revisiting that accountability ecosystem that the Auditor General has been talking about. You know, you look at that and it is such a simple a diagram, but it is so profound. It's a quick way to remind us of what we should be doing. We need to be very transparent as the public sector so that we can enable that active citizenry. Laws allow us to be, well, not allow, laws direct that we are transparent. If you're looking at the MFMA, for instance, it will tell you that, I think it's Section 75, that you need to publish the budget. There are certain things that we are required to publish to enable that transparency. South Africa is deemed to be one of the most transparent countries by the Transparency Index. If you're looking at our budget, right? We're rated top 5 in the world. Great. But that is only at a national treasury level. At local government, it is very difficult for me as a citizen to hold the municipality to account. I'll make an example then about the corruption that I spoke about. Corruption will only be known by those that are working in the municipality if it has happened, or by the Auditor General if they are lucky enough during their sample to pick up something. But the citizen whose money we are handling have got no way of knowing that before the Auditor General comes. You know, a simple issue of publishing awarded tenders, Khaya. There's a requirement for us to award that, but we only advertise the call or the RFQs and whatever, but we do not enable the citizens to hold us account, and therefore active citizenry is non-existent in the country. Even in instances where communities will come to us looking for information, it could be on anything, we treat them as second-class citizens. We have lost the public servant drive that should be, you know, informing everything that we should be doing in a municipality. I do not know who was talking, it was a previous speaker from Akile that was talking about how if you call a municipality, you struggle. If the line is answered, then you will probably get a very rude person on the other hand. And I am not trying to speak negatively on local government. I have worked in local government. I am also a community member in a municipality where I come from, where a simple matter of just inquiring about your bill, you expect me to pay, but you are not even able to clarify this bill for me if I'm seeking clarity. So I think we need to avoid talking a lot and digressing. We need to perhaps focus on active citizenry and enable them to hold us to account. We're giving them limited information currently because we do not want them to be smart enough to hold us to account. We're not giving them the information that they are entitled to. You're looking at the public consultations on budgets or IDP. Who is going to be able to read a 500-page IDP or budget from the community's perspective and be able to understand that? So we like hiding this information. We are not enabling our citizens to hold us to account.
Yeah. Vinay, we publish these reports, audit reports every year, and the simple question is, beyond the point of publication, do citizens actually know what's been published? Do citizens know what to do with it? Because from where I'm sitting, these are supposed to be the instruments of accountability that says that, look, we elected you into public office in order to obviously, exercise some custody over these public resources. This is what we want, and this is how we want to see it being done. So in the Auditor General's report, you can see, yes, indeed, there was performance information, there was financial information, but the simple question of, do citizens then take those reports and then say, on the basis of what you signed up for when you put you into office versus what this report says you've done or haven't done, this is what we need to do differently. Have we got to that stage where these are becoming very, very comprehensive instruments of accountability that citizens can use?
Thanks for that, Khaya. From an Auditor General's perspective, you'll note that we audit and we report annually, and we report to the legislature or to National Parliament. But further to that, as the Auditor General, what we do is we sort of prepare general reports where we try and summarize the audit outcomes so that it is easier for the citizens out there to understand what we say when we say a qualified audit opinion or an unqualified, or we say irregular expenditure or fruitless expenditure. We try and break it down into layman's terms or simple terms so that we avoid the technical jargon that we used to as the accountants, but to try and bring it into simple language so that the citizens can understand where the money is being used. So you'll know that we prepare an MFMA general report, a PFMA general report. We focus on certain themes in terms of our multi-year audit plan as well. So we'd look at a theme of infrastructure, we'd look at a theme of water, we'd look at a theme of energy, for instance, and those on those themes, then we'll highlight what are the key challenges that are being faced, and that those reports are then sort of through the media. The Auditor General will brief the media, and there's various sort of roadshows that is held where these messages are actually communicated and unpacked so that the citizens can understand what is being done with their money and where are the challenges in terms of money that is not well spent or not spent for the purpose it was intended. Thank you, Khaya.
And I think the importance of that is that obviously if we are going to say that we want to do things differently, we need to be able to take a pulse test of saying that, look, this is what we currently produce, this is how we currently produce it, does it actually achieve those particular outcomes? So I think that's going to be an important way of making sure that these reports are as accessible and as easily understandable as they can be, and I think that's something that we need to work on. Mr. Dlamuka, I mean, you know, when we speak about the issues relating to resources and infrastructure, I like just to focus on the question of human resources, because obviously the reason we ended up with the consultancy dependence is because there was a misalignment or a mismatch of technical resources in here. We have individuals in the room that are part of the ecosystem, but I suspect everyone in the room has got a story to share about how better their teams or their structures could be, but we're not there yet. And of course, the question of resource limitations is a key one. Now, you have spent the better part of the past 20 years working in these different institutions within the public sector and within the civil service. The first question, have we got the capacitation question right?
Yeah. Khaya, that's a serious question. I think the capacity in the public sector is one of the fundamental shortfalls that we are facing as a public sector. Especially in the municipality, if you look to the local municipality, how do we attract the key skills in that local municipality level? You see, it makes it difficult. Without that particular skill and requisite in terms of qualification and experience, it's going to be very difficult for you to perform. A different model, therefore, is needed in terms of how do we respond, because at a level of metro and a local municipality is not the same. The attraction in terms and retention of skills in those areas, it's quite different. And to attract a good skill, you need sound financial resources to compensate for that particular skill. But we are finding a serious challenge. So the whole model, I think, for me, Khaya, I think the way even we decentralize, the issue of having like your local municipality, district municipality, and metro level, I don't think it's a model which is going to take us where we want to be. I think the whole of this local municipality and municipal structure need to be reviewed so that we can be able to harness and assemble resources to attract adequate skill to deliver the service. It doesn't help us to have a local municipality who can hardly survive or pay for the salaries. The model is not giving us what we want, and we immediately need to look to the model. In actually considering the extent of unemployment at a local level, it's almost impossible to collect any rent for the rates or for the services. How are you expecting those particular municipalities to survive? You want to continuously have then a migration coming to the city, and the city is overcrowded. Rather than creating a different model, I think it's a time that we really look to those models. Maybe in 1994, they were correct, but I don't think now they are yielding the benefit that we want. Thanks, guys.
I think also the presentation that we had beforehand, which sort of indicated that, look, we've got this very rich history of creating laws and structures and regulations for a system and for a world that has long evolved. And I think obviously before COVID, the idea that you could be based here and work there was a very, very foreign concept, but now those possibilities are there. And I think from the people in the room, you probably will be able to find out that, look, now that we've learned to work differently, then perhaps you can access the type of resources and the skills that usually used to be restricted by geographic boundaries. And that's a thing that we need to be able to canvas, but I'm not sure how far we are in getting there, so we'd like to hear from the audience later on about what their insights might be in relation to that. Now, Mr. Twala, when we then speak about the fact that we've got this particular capacity issue, we've got this and its intersectional effects, you mentioned that internal audit is a central piece of getting us there. You mentioned that the idea of proactive audits are going to get us in a much better position. Now, the question of the resourcing of internal audit functions across the ecosystem, is that something that we've got right, or is it simply a matter of we wish we had 257 chief internal auditors across all municipalities? They quite simply don't exist, and if they do exist, not everybody's interested in working in a show because it's in the middle of nowhere. How do we deal with that?
No, thank you very much, Khaya. I think in most municipalities, the issue of internal audit is just seen as a compliance issue. Because if you look, even in our district, when you look, when we do our own, research, just to check how many auditors are employed in each municipality, you will find that maybe in one municipality we'll have maybe, let me say, 2 internal auditors, or maybe 3 internal auditors. So that makes it difficult for internal audit to be able to deliver in its mandate. Because as you audit, you need someone that is going to go out there and audit. Someone must come back and review the work that has been done by that auditor. And then someone must also do the reporting. So now, if you have at least about, let me say, 2 or 3 internal auditors, that are supposed maybe to service a municipality that is having around, let me say, 500 employees. You know, that if you look at the ratio, there's no way that that internal audit function will be able to deliver on its mandate. So that means we are still far from getting well-resourced internal audit functions.
How do we get around it? I mean, we know what the problem statement is. I saw a presentation earlier on that says, never mind what it used to be, these are the instruments, these are the tools that we can use to do things differently. Should that be where we move the conversation towards asking the Deputy Minister, well, tell us what the pathway towards breaking those silos, those operational limitations, those structural limitations of yesteryear, is that where we should be going?
Yes, but another thing that we need to do, we need to be deliberate about it. That means when we go for our strategic planning and we talk about positions that we need to create within our municipality, we need to prioritize such positions. As I said earlier, internal audit must not be seen just as a compliance issue. It's supposed to be seen as a department that adds value in that municipality. That means we need to be deliberate and budget for those positions in our municipalities.
I think that's a very important point, because for as long as people don't think it's worth it, they're probably not going to focus on proper capacitation. Msizi, there is a reality that is a big issue in South Africa, is that there might be a lot of individuals with absolutely the right intentions and absolutely the right spirit to be able to work in these structures, only to find out that the type of educational pathways they've been exposed to and the skill pathways they've been exposed to quite simply don't give them a fair chance of doing those jobs properly. Is this now a conversation that invites us to question how we can aid those that are already within the system to be better capacitated in terms of reskilling and upskilling them? Because I imagine that if we're struggling to attract new people, we probably need to do a lot more with those that are already within the system in order to help them do better.
No, you're 100% correct, Khaya. So if you look at what needs to be done, and maybe you borrow from what professionalization talks to, one of the key pillars is actually the capacitation of people that are already there. And I think it's part of any decision making in terms of trying to come up with solutions that when you try to implement as a leader, administrative or political, when you try to implement any kind of solution, you need to also firstly consider the people that are there. What is going to be good for the organization, what's going to be good for the municipality, what is needed by the municipality, but also what is needed by the employees, the citizens, and all the other stakeholders that you may be serving as well. So one of the key pillars, like I've mentioned, is capacitation of the incumbent officials or public finance engineers or engineering department or whatever unit. You cannot then say, if you are going to bring in new people, then you need to automatically remove the people that were already there. It is a need of firstly working with what skills and knowledge. A lot of the times people have a lot of knowledge and institutional knowledge at that about the organization. So, and there's different ways. There's a major conversation that is happening around RPL, for example, in terms of how can that be used to aid the people that are already incumbent in the different organizations, whether it's a municipality or department, so that they are also capacitated. Because one of the things that we have seen as an example is some organizations try to bring in an experienced CFO. Some of the times it's going to be a chartered accountant. They bring in one person to try and solve all of the issues that they have. Now, one of two things can happen. Of course, the person may succeed, and that's great. They might not last a long time, or the person can struggle because they are unable to work with the people that are there. And perhaps maybe then their goal or their focus is not in the right place, and they're trying to look at the financial systems and trying to get reports out. Whereas if you're also focusing on the people that you need to support you, or rather capacitating the people that you need to support you and get everybody to rally behind then your objective. So I think inherently you do need to capacitate first the people that are already there.
I have a follow-up question. I mean, what then becomes the role of institutions like CIGFARO to advocate for that, for those processes? Because I think you may find there's a few individuals here who have said that I want to do this within my team. I want to make sure that people are going for these causes and all of these other, technical updates. But if it's not a universal practice, then it's simply a matter of you may be lucky as a municipality that you've got one person who believes in it, but we need to have these things embedded in the ecosystem. Is this then the responsibility that we should be promoting from structures and platforms, whether it's a BASA, whether it's CIGFARO, whether it's SAIC itself, to then say, wait, hold on, there is a universal problem, and here is one approach that enables us to lift as many boats as possible simultaneously?
Khaya, I think one of the biggest or the bigger issues based on my observation is that we are having different conversations in our own little corners. We don't have a universal approach to the issue, where you may find perhaps that as professional bodies, sometimes you are also just trying to get your own people in your own corner. I don't think there's one person, whether it's from the government side, and we do see efforts every now and then. There's constantly conversations at SALGA, conversations at the School of Government. So there's efforts everywhere. But if you think about it, and I think we've had some kind of conversation with CIGFARO around, but if we all bringing into an organization to say, okay, if we want to get everybody, call it on board in one way or the other, whether it's belonging to a professional body or capacitated, we actually all need to speak in one voice and take this to the different organizations or to government. I think currently that is not there, that is lacking. There are efforts to try and get there, but you can see that there are a lot of challenges, let's call it, in trying to get everybody to sort of speak in one voice.
Vice President, is this a CIGFARO mission?
Yes, I think as CIGFARO, we are targeting that. We are in the process of developing your SOPs just to make sure that if a person is employed in a municipality, let me say that is a revenue manager, they're supposed to have, the toolkit to be able to know exactly what is expected from him or her if he's employed. So that's what we will be doing as CIGFARO in the next year or two, just to make sure that those are in place.
No, I think it's a good start, but we need to make sure that everybody understands what's being done, because you probably have like the greatest collection of insights within the room of people who can share some insights onto what can work and what needs to work a bit better. Now, Vinay, there is an idea that I've had, and it's good that I don't work for the AG, because you would have fired me from day one. And it is a problem statement that says that every year you will come, you will audit me, and you will know what the outcomes are going to be. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, so you gave me that qualified audit report, and then you come back 12 months later, and then you come back 12 months later. So you and I have built this very clear understanding that you will come, you'll audit me, I'll tell you how bad I am, you'll report on it, and then we're going to move on. And then the question that comes is to then say, well, at what point in time do we get to a process that says, look, after the reporting, here's what you then, as either the Auditor General or another institution, can come back and say, guys, we said that this is what needs to be done. We now acknowledge that left to your own devices, you're kind of not going to get there. Here's the roadmap. Here's the master plan of what we can do. And the reason I want to raise this is that it perhaps becomes an issue that gets championed at national level or at provincial level, where there is either a task team or whether you call it, this fusion center that says, here are the 5 municipalities that have those types of outcomes. We know left to their own devices, the answer will be the same. So here's how we marshal the troops that are going to address 1, 2, or 3 issues so we can start seeing progress. Because let's face it, if I'm a CFO that doesn't have the capacity or doesn't have the resources, I can tell you right now what the answer is going to be next year. So what's the point of us just doing this? Is this a conversation we should be having?
Khaya, thanks for that. And as you rightly point out, I mean, we come after the fact, and if you know the answer beforehand and things haven't moved, I mean, it's pretty much more of the same, painting the same picture, and it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the citizens out there in terms of improvement of financial management in the public sector translating to service delivery. There's a couple of things that we've done as the Auditor General just to look at this. How do we come in earlier? And one of those initiatives was the Status of Records Review, where Status of Records Review is not an audit. We would come and say, this is the recommendations that we've made last year based on the audit outcome. Let's see how you've progressed. What is your audit action plan? Are you implementing your audit action plan? Is it being monitored and monitored through is it being monitored through implementation by internal audit and also monitored by your audit committee, your accounting officer, etc.? How are you progressing? So that's a review outside of the audit process. The other initiative that we've implemented is interim audits. Interim audits gives you an opportunity to be able to fix things before we come for the year-end audit where it's too late. I mean, once you submit your financial statements and there's material misstatements there, it's too late. But an interim audit would allow you an opportunity to come and prepare for the year-end by fixing up those things. So take advantage of those things. Audit action plans are important, Khaya, I mentioned before, and monitoring and looking at whether that audit action plan is fit for purpose. And that's going to be an important exercise. So take advantage of making sure that you get the value from internal audit, that you are reporting through the audit committee on the progress of implementing those action plans. And that'll then give us, hopefully, the necessary traction and in a positive way. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's going to be quite an important way of making sure that we're a bit more proactive, because I do think that the traditional model of we'll show up 3 months or 4 weeks afterwards is kind of not getting us there. At this stage, I'd like to check from the audience if there are any particular insights that you'd like to share. So you can just raise a hand. We'll try and get a mic to you. Feel free to ask my celebrities all the difficult questions that I haven't been able to cover because I'm scared of them. And also share some of those insights that you have. We've got a hand there on the right. I'm not calling you a right winger. I'm just saying that you're on the right of the room. Any left wingers? I mean, any people on the left? Okay, we'll start with you, sir. If you can just get the mic too. Thank you. Please just stand up so we can get you on the Instagram, and also just tell us who you are. Thank you.
Thank you. I am Malwand Ndisana. I just want to just touch on 2 topics. So the first one is around, I mean, if you look at the last, I think the first speaker spoke about soft skills, and one of them, I think, for me that comes to mind is critical thinking. Just from an audit perspective, if you look at the SACA results, you can see that a lot of the talent that is graduating and passing the board exams is either going to the Big Four or they are leaving the country, meaning that the pool of auditors left auditing the state is quite thin in terms of first-year critical thinkers being able to come into the system and audit. So in terms of that, the audit approach, is it still viable to frequently use first years to test PPE when they're testing PPE for municipalities? And do we think that that model and people who are not really experienced, who haven't really been in the system long enough or prepared financial statements or registers, in even how we select teams, do we look at perhaps the experience people have in terms of when we allocate? Because I think some of the contributions are not necessarily always about inefficiencies of municipalities, but also about the soft skills within the team, the audit team, and their abilities. I'm not saying that people are incapable, but I'm just saying perhaps experience is required. Then, in terms of the capacity within municipalities, when I've been around, I've seen a lot of municipalities with people who are really have been there for a long time. People tend to not really be mobile and move between places, so they stay in roles for a long time. So if they came in unskilled, they obviously gain the experience. So I think they are capable and skilled, but I think we're not talking to for example, a revenue manager knows that he's not going to be able to collect enough revenue in a certain ward because of a councillor's influence and so forth. So, or SCM will not be award a tender because of certain influences. So, to what point do we expect those civil servants to still be committed and be effective in their roles with those influences? Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to know, how do you capacitate? Firstly, you talk about the issue of people that are skilled, people that are professional. How do you capacitate a cadre that is not even having any skill? And you are expected to perform in your area as the manager. So how do you deal with that? Yes, I understand that you say this person is being deployed to you, and this person maybe doesn't even have a national diploma, doesn't even know how to use a computer. You try by all means. How do you deal with that? Because at the end of the day, we talk about the consequence management. Because you said that you can't, I think Dr. Jay said that you can't implement consequence management. You need to capacitate that individual. So now I'm asking, is a cadre sent to you without any qualification? Even if you want to capacitate, that person doesn't show any interest. How do you deal with that?
I can relate very well to what Uzandile is talking about. I occupied a corporate services function, and corporate services deals with your recruitment. I was responsible for ICT, legal services, and that's just a general administration. So HR is a problem that people first, it's a space that people first want to enter. Be it there is a change in politics. 2021 local government elections imposed a lot of changes, especially in this province, where you either have a coalition governance or you have a political party altogether that is now in charge of this municipality. And with cadre deployment, quid pro quo arrangements, you are then expected to move people around. I made examples of bottles when I was moving around bottles, trying to illustrate it to my colleagues just before you arrived, when we were trying to have a conversation to say, you will be asked to move employee A from head of SCM. I'm just making an example. He's a head of SCM, but because the politics have changed, you need to move him to another department, because then the new chief in town has to have their own person there. And the intention is really all about controlling the pest and having access right to the pest. Going back to then your question is, you cannot do that. You cannot skill that person. There is just so much that you can do. I was making an example again when we were talking in private, and I will say it again, that, I am not even motivated to apply for a job anymore, because You get these positions, 20 of them, the adverts that you must place out, but you already have people that you are told that they must occupy this position. If Khaya does not qualify for this position, you are told to lower the requirements so that Khaya can come in. So how are you going to upskill that person? There's just no experience at all. So it is a painful discussion. It is an emotional issue for me. I recall one day having a conversation with my political leader saying, you need to put Khaya here. I said, but Khaya does not qualify. Can I maybe, you get to a point where you negotiate and you plead with your leaders. Can I perhaps put him underneath this person? Let's promote the current incumbent to this vacancy and maybe put the one that you have underneath. And then you asked, why do you think that political party A is not entitled to money? Why do you want them in a lower position? And the intention really is you want to try and manage the politics. At the end of the day, we are employees. We also have children to feed. We have responsibilities. So you try and you navigate around these issues up until you can't, like I do. So the short answer is no, you cannot. And you have this individual that knows the power that they have. Associated to the mayor, to the speaker, or whoever, and so you can't really tell that person anything. You will have an employee that will tell you when you are trying to discipline them that I will report you to the mayor, I will report you to political party A, and you know that is going to happen. So you have to choose between your job or doing the right thing. And I chose to walk away. So it is not easy for many to walk away. It is not easy for me either. But at some point, you need to ask yourself, what about your reputation? I'm still fairly young. I'm not that young. And I believed that there are certain things that I can do elsewhere. So no, you cannot skill that person. You cannot do anything about that person. Thanks.
And it's not just at local level, because you would have seen in the past couple of days where there have been reports that some of the new ministers have applied for deviations from the Public Service Administration to say, oh, we see that the rules say that the person must have these qualifications, but can I have someone who doesn't have those qualifications? So for me, what was troubling about that was not the fact that the minister rightfully rejected them, but the idea that even at that level, people can then say, oh no, the rules are for everyone else and not for me. That ministers are still trying to smuggle their people into the system is, for me, an ongoing reflection of the multifaceted nature of the challenge.
And you're right. I mean, the amendments to the Public Audit Act gave us the additional powers, and it brought in the concept of the material irregularity. And it allows us then to follow certain steps, and it's all legislated that we've got to issue the notification of the material irregularity. We've got to allow for a process for action to be taken. Where there is no action being taken, then there's a remedial action process which is enforceable. Then we go into the further process thereafter, which is the issuing of the certificate of debt. And then it's for the executive authority to then, or the accounting authority or the accounting officer, to then manage the collection of that debt for the losses that we incurred through the MI process. The colleague is right that we normally don't do the investigations ourselves. We refer those investigations to other public bodies that have the skills and the capacity to actually to be able to do those investigations. And through those investigations processes, then cases are open, etc. And you'll note since this whole expanded powers have come in, we've raised multiple material irregularities, both in the MFMA space and also the PFMA space. There are losses that we prevented, further losses that we prevented. There were certain recoveries that did occur. So it is a process that's ongoing, Khaya. It is something that cannot sort of happen overnight, but it is a process that we are actually following, and we are making sure that where we are picking up that there are losses, or there is harm to the citizens, or there is a harm to another public sector institution, that we are in fact raising those material irregularities, and we are raising it in our general reports that we do table annually. Thank you.
Worried in terms of the language that we use sometimes in an attempt to try and get a point through. which I believe is very important because the language and the choice of words that we then use is very important for other people to actually grasp what it is that you are actually trying to say. But I think one issue that I think I need to caution, or maybe to say, let's rather have a different way of talking about it, is the issue of the use of consultants. Because first I think we need to make sure that at all times we remind ourselves what a consultant is, first of all. And we also differentiate between use of consultants and reliance of consultants, because those are two different things. There may be nothing wrong with using consultants, but what may actually be wrong is the reliance on the consultants. That's what I believe might actually be the issue that we actually need to talk about. Because a consultant in some instances, they are just people that are brought in to just try and clear one blockage so that we can then move forward. So basically, you need to differentiate between use of consultants and reliance on consultants, and actually understand and make sure that everyone, every time we talk about the topic of consultants, everyone has a full understanding of what the two actually mean. That's the main thing that I felt maybe I needed to raise so that going forward, we'll try and be very careful in terms of the use of the words, because the choice of words that we use may actually diminish even the meaning of actually what we're trying to say or what we're trying to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We had one last hand there on the extreme left, if you can start running towards them. And I think, that question of the dimension between utilization and the dependency is something that definitely needs to be resolved. And if we don't get it right, we're going to be in a perpetual conversation loop. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
No, thank you very much, Chair of the panel. Let me firstly start by saying my name is Dite Rombezi. I'm the Speaker of Madibeng Local Municipality in the Northwest, Pojala District, Madibeng Sub-District. Chair, let me welcome all the submissions by the panel members, and I believe we are aware, all of us, that local government challenges are documented, as some panel members have already mentioned that. When I was seated here, I did not want to raise my hand, Chair, but because I was engaging with my colleague, because he submitted something, I was saying to him, look, AG, even if Public Audit Act was amended in 2019 to give AG the powers to identify material irregularities, but council has the role to hold executive accountable. So he was saying to me, no, look, if MPEC members are not doing their work, I said to him now, look, we have role players in the local government. Hence, it's important that we work together so that at the end, every individual is being held accountable. And indeed, also I want to comment on the role of the internal audit. It's important that that unit should make an impact in that area. And where I'm coming from in Madibeng is a municipality that is famous. We've been getting disclaimer, Chair, for the past 7 years, but at least now AG spoke, nicely about us, because we have moved from disclaimer to adverse, even though adverse is still a bad opinion. But I'm here with the team. I saw some of the officials from Madibeng from the same BTO department, and I believe they are listening to this presentation, and we are hoping that when we go back home, we'll change the situation in Madibeng. And lastly, maybe let me share again to say we had an MPEC and we dissolved it because it was dysfunctional, but we subsequently re-established another one, and we also dissolved as council audit committee we also subsequently re-established it. So we are serious in Madibeng. We want to change the situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Definitely a lot of interesting things happening there.
Come even closer together and work together to try and solve some of these problems that we meet often to talk about. So I think that would be my challenge to CIGFARO.
The pathway for collaboration is already there. It needs to be strengthened. That's challenge number one. Vinay?
Thank you, Khaya. Firstly, let me say that from the Auditor General side, one of our key strategic objectives is around influence. And this platform allows us as the Auditor General, and we'd like to thank the organizers for giving us this opportunity to be able to come and be part of this panel discussion and hopefully influence in a positive direction. And I just want to congratulate the Madibeng municipality for the seriousness with which they're taking action, and it's always positive. I mean, a small step forward is a step forward, and that's what we appreciate to ultimately move and accelerate public finance excellence forward. My call to action, Khaya, would be collaboration, coordination of all role players to make sure that we can accelerate public finance excellence. Thank you.
Collaboration, coordination, it's still coming back to you, CIGFARO. Doctor?
Thank you. I think we need to acknowledge COGTA. COGTA has done, has already done the hard work for the sector in terms of, ensuring that senior managers that are reporting to the accounting officers are permanent. I think that was a great step towards ensuring that now senior managers are able to work freely without fear of, if I don't do this, then my contract might not be extended. So kudos to COGTA for that. But I think if I'm now looking at CIGFARO, I'm picking on the conversation that we're having. Msizi made a comment about how efforts are everywhere to support local government. And I think it is fair to say we don't really have anything to show for it. And I think what CIGFARO should be doing is to bridge that gap. There's everyone doing everything. I don't know how much money Treasury has spent on support programs for local government. Everyone is doing something. SALGA is doing something. COGTA is doing something. Perhaps CIGFARO could play a sort of project management role, for lack of a better word, and try to bring these individuals together as they are doing now, continue with these conversations and try to bridge that gap where everyone is doing something and try to coordinate ourselves, because the IGR space is just overwhelmed with interventions, but we don't really have something to show for it.
No, thank you very much, Khaya. I think at CIGFARO, we are collaborating with other professional bodies, also with the National Treasury.